and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, known nationally as the Money Lady. Since 1976, I have been advising and counseling people in the arena of finance, economics, insurance, real estate, you name it. When it comes to money, think about Michelle. So on today's segment, I'm delighted to have on my show for this next hour a gentleman who has specialized in an area that is quite troubling. And we're going to talk about that. That has to deal with financial abuse of elderly, an epidemic in the United States. So I'm concerned about it, having been involved in this area of money since the early, I think the year 2000 I got involved. That's been 12 years ago, because I saw some disturbing trends in the area of financial abuse. And because, unfortunately, I have had more than my share of situations through friendships and family to let me know and to let you know that this is a problem. So I brought the expert, the gentleman who specializes in this as a practice of law, and his name is Craig T. Matthews. He is lead counsel in his own firm based in Dayton, Ohio area, but with offices also in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we're going to be talking about the whole area of financial abuse of the elderly, including what it is, what it looks like, how do you know how to avoid it, are there steps you can take to minimize the risk of being taken advantage of. And so I'm excited about today. Please sit down, call your friends, tell your family members, tell some of the people that are senior citizens to sit down and to tune into this show right now. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my guest for the next hour, attorney at law, Craig T. Matthews. And good day.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here. I appreciate you extending this invitation. This is an area that's near and dear to my heart. I have a father that I told you some time ago. I lost to Alzheimer's, so I've had that personal experience with it. And actually in the late 80s, I had a gentleman client that was victimized by his nephew and lost his entire life savings. That was the first case I was involved in.
My goodness, can you give me more detail about that?
He was in the hospital for some injuries that he suffered. He lived by himself. He had never been married. He had no children, but he had a nephew in town.
Okay, never married, no children, had a nephew.
Correct.
Okay.
And the nephew wasn't particularly close to, but you know, they'd get together for maybe Thanksgiving or a holiday or so. In the hospital, the nephew visited him. Gee, uncle, so sorry to hear that what happened to you, and started talking, brings him flowers, and then starts talking about, gosh, what's going to happen with taking care of your bills when you're away. It looks like you're going to be in the hospital for a few weeks here. If you need someone to help out, I'd be happy to go to your place and make sure your mail's taken care of and your bills are paid. Next thing you know, he gets his uncle to sign a power of attorney.
Okay, well, let's, for the benefit of those who are viewing who do not know what a power of attorney is, would you please, as an attorney, tell my viewers what that document is?
Certainly. As Jesse James, had he known about a power of attorney, he never would have robbed a bank.
Wouldn't have robbed the bank.
A power of attorney is a legal document. It can be a short one. It could be as short as 1 page. Mine probably are more like 8 pages.
Okay.
But basically, it's a document that a person will sign and say, I am appointing someone else.
Okay.
And it can be a stranger. It could be a relative, anyone. Someone else to be able to sign my name for me on any types of documents.
So they, in fact, become you.
Correct.
By that document.
They can walk into a bank with that document, into your bank, and open your accounts, withdraw money from your accounts. They can sell your real estate. They can sell your car. They can do anything that you can do.
That's a
Anything.
powerful document.
It is. There's no more
That is
powerful
a powerful
document.
So continue the story, which isn't a story actually,
This
it's
is
a
truth.
recount.
This is a
a truth. Okay.
This really happened. And he gets his uncle to sign a power of attorney, and the uncle is delighted that his nephew is going to help take care of it. By the time the uncle got out of the house, the hospital, his entire bank account, his entire life savings had been withdrawn and
By this nephew.
by the nephew, acting under the power of attorney. Then, when he wanted the money back, the nephew said, "No, you gave that to me because I said I would take care of you." And that's how he ended up, his caretaker introduced him to me. And that was, I demanded that the nephew immediately return the funds, but he retained an attorney, and he said, no, this was a gift. I said I would take care of him, and he wanted to, out of affection for me, wanted me to have his entire life savings, which,
In writing,
no, no.
but he did have his he signed a POA.
Correct.
Oh. May I ask the outcome of that particular litigation?
Fortunately, the good news is it's a good outcome.
Good.
I had to file suit. I took it to a jury, and I'm a big believer in juries. The jury thought that this was just ridiculous and ordered judgment for the full amount that was taken, plus punitive damages and attorney's fees. Of course, then they appealed. I had to take it up to the Court of Appeals. Court of Appeals affirmed the judgment. Then I had to find the money. They had taken
Okay, I
this
was
money.
going to say, where is the money?
They hid it in a mobile home park in South Carolina.
A mobile
Yes,
home park
They invested
in
it, yeah.
South Carolina?
Yeah.
Did
So-
they invest or did they hide the cash?
An
or-
investment. They purchased an interest,
Okay.
like financial investors in this mobile home park. So
So
I
he
had to
did
follow the
have an
money.
agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I got every penny back.
Good
this
for
guy.
you,
Yes,
Craig.
Yes.
That had to have been enlightening, to say the least.
It was an eye-opener.
My God.
And but it felt good for me to eventually, while he was still alive, to
Yes.
get his money back into his bank account.
Yes. Now, do you have a story after the story, which is he had his money back in his bank account, and did he have someone that could, in fact, handle his affairs? Because probably the need was still there. Was he able to
Yes.
hire someone or a money manager or someone to do that?
Fortunately, he did. Fortunately, it was another client of mine that was just a compassionate person, and he was helping this older gentleman kind of as a caretaker, and he was able to then act as a legitimate power of attorney
Good.
under my supervision and watchful eye, and he did what was
I'm
right.
sure he did. Did he have to post bond or anything
No.
like? Okay.
No.
That is very,
No.
very good. But this brings to my mind immediately how serious this issue is, this issue of these financial crimes against the elderly. And do you have any statistics about how widespread it is in today's environment?
Last I'd read, $2.6 billion a year
$2.6 billion, Craig?
are coming out
A
of
year
yes,
is being extracted
from the elderly.
from the elderly. That's horrible.
It's just an enormous, enormous amount. Enormous.
Well, let's talk about the types of financial crimes, because I know that AARP has published a lot of articles in their magazines about things that have happened to people. But let's kind of talk about, in an overview way, what is a typical victim look like?
I've done some study in that area, and the interesting answer to that question is there's no typical victim. Some people mistake, and they think the typical victim is not educated or they're not sophisticated, and actually that isn't the case. Oftentimes, or frequently enough, the victim can be educated.
Okay.
They can be sophisticated. They formerly were business people, But now the typical profile would be living alone.
Living alone.
So they don't have someone to bounce ideas off of. That makes them lonely, no matter...
Would you say, are they isolated when you
Yes.
say living alone? Because
Correct.
a lot of people live alone.
Correct.
But I think if they're perhaps isolated, they don't have any community ties, maybe church or family.
Well, often
does that
a
make a
widow or a
difference?
widower,
Okay.
you know, they've lived a long life in a relationship. They lost that person, and now the kids, you know, in today's world, kids can be
everywhere.
in California,
They're
Florida,
everywhere.
everywhere. So the kids aren't visiting that often. They have friends, they might have church, but most of the time they're spending by themselves, sitting in the living room, you know, watching television or so, and it makes them vulnerable to someone who shows an interest, someone who shows some attention.
Okay.
Even if that person is a stranger or so, they're susceptible to wanting that attention and forming that friendship.
Okay. Okay.
Regardless of their past sophistication, you know, there are very clever thieves out there. And it's some of the scams that I'm aware of are extremely sophisticated. And some of the things that are done, like this power of attorney,
Oh my
the victim
God.
doesn't even know that it's happening. It's
Right.
legitimate to sign a
Right.
power of attorney.
Yes, it is.
I often have clients sign powers of attorney to their spouse.
Right. And,
Or-
and likewise, Craig, in my private practice, power of attorneys are very important legal instruments,
Exactly.
of which without one, the consequences can be dire.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Yes,
Yeah.
my parents had powers of attorney. I recommend them routinely if you have someone you can trust.
Yeah.
But that's the big if.
Yeah.
Some people are not as careful as they should be in selecting who that power of attorney is. It should be someone that you can trust without question, someone that you have known for a long period of time, someone who has a background, a history, someone that you know is not going to be taking advantage of you.
Do you ever run into situations where, despite a person's best assessment of an individual, that individual turns out to not be exactly as honorable as that person presumed?
I haven't run into that. The victims that I have seen gave their powers of attorney to people that they didn't have that level of trust with. Even this nephew-uncle situation. He knew his nephew over the years, of course, as a nephew, but he admitted to me he didn't know him that well. He would, and they'd exchange cards, maybe they'd share a meal together a couple times a year. That's really not a lot of knowledge.
Right. So
It's-
if
yeah.
a person does not have good family relationships, are there alternative trusted advisors that would fit the requirements for a POA?
I think it could be a close, trusted family member that is also sophisticated. The family member who you give the power of attorney to, it's not enough that they love you. They also have to be
They have to know what
street
they're-
smart,
Yes.
so they know what they're doing. They're organized. If it's
What
not
about
a
a bank?
well,
A banker. And on that segue, I don't want to lose train, but I did read the Dayton Daily News article about the elderly couple that was ripped off and conned by a bank employee of a fairly large local bank, Union Savings Bank. And it sounded like a confidence scheme from my reading it, but it was very disturbing because a bank is viewed as a citadel of trust with employees that have to be trustworthy, no criminal background, all of the characteristics of people who are trusted. And
exactly.
that was very disturbing to me.
That was a very tricky one, Michelle. Yes, that was in the Dayton Daily News, their Sunday front page story
Yes.
last fall. And that was a situation where an elderly couple, she was probably in her late 80s and he was early 90s. He was dying. He had end-stage kidney failure.
Okay,
He was on
renal.
dialysis. A very frugal couple. He built their own home by his hand 65 years ago.
That is absolutely
He was
amazing.
he was the kind of person that he would save up money to buy the blocks, and when he had enough money saved, he'd go to the
Lumber yard.
lumber yard, buy the blocks, put them in place, and then he'd stop until he saved enough money. He was that kind of a person, and built his own house. He would drive across town to save 10 cents on a box of cornflakes. He was that kind of a guy. Worked 3 jobs. He was retired from GM, but then he had other jobs. He raised 2 wonderful children. They thought their parents were poor.
They thought their parents were poor.
They had no idea because he lived in this very humble house and lived almost like a pauper.
Mm-hmm.
Unbeknownst to them, because of frugality, he had amassed more than $1 million.
$1 million. Is
But-
that of liquid assets?
Of cash.
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 That's as
CDs.
liquid. That's as liquid as one get. $1 million.
Correct. In CDs. But
For
there's
he and
one
his
per-
wife. That's wonderful.
That's correct.
That's
His kids had no idea, but
Wow.
one person knew. The banker.
The bank.
So when they came to the bank, there was a bank manager, unfortunately,
Yeah.
at this Union Savings Bank in Centerville, Kettering area of Dayton, suburb
Mm-hmm.
of Dayton, that knew how much money this old couple had. Next thing you know, when they're coming into the bank to do their banking, they were taken aside and seated at a table and offered cookies and coffee and such. Next thing you know, the banker is coming to their house and visiting and picking up their mail for them and offering to do some banking for them. You know, you don't even have to come into the bank. I can take your check and we can do this. Starts having them sign papers, including a power of attorney.
Okay, well, stop right there. At the point, now, for the record, most commercial banks have a private banking division and even a trust division. This is not a, this is a savings bank, a little
Correct.
bit different. But they do have private bankers that will go to the client's home to handle banking transactions, many times as a convenience for the client.
Correct.
But now they've stepped into executing legal instruments.
Correct. Correct. And at this case, the comments that I'm making are public record. Nothing I've said
Nothing,
here.
right.
This case
Viewers,
is
you can go and look at it, go to Google and look up Dayton Daily News, and you'll see the article. Yeah,
and the article is based upon interviews with the
Right,
with the woman,
right.
with her daughter,
right.
and with the papers
I
that
read
have
the
been filed.
entire article, and then I went to internet as well, and horrible.
Yes. And this is the bank manager. Starts inviting her husband to come to the house, and the husband now starts cutting the lawn for them and
Cutting the lawn
and becomes
for this elderly couple.
becomes the elderly couple's closest friends.
Okay. This
And
sounds like this does not sound normal.
this is not a normal situation, which is why.
However, as an elderly couple, I could see them feeling that there was some affinity relationship, perhaps.
they felt
Comfortable as their banker.
their banker, a trusted person, the banker's husband, looked like a nice young couple.
Young couple.
Paying attention to them. And of course, older people, the kids never pay enough attention.
Right.
So,
Well, the
this
kids
is
are trying to raise their kids, but it's true.
Right, so
It
this is
true.
people are paying more attention to them.
Yes.
And the next thing died. And now the woman, elderly woman's living by herself.
And all of those liquid assets have now conveyed to her.
Well, she doesn't know that.
Oh.
But the daughter visits one day.
Okay.
Mom, how you doing? And the daughter would check on the mail and notices on the kitchen table a letter from a bank out of Columbus welcoming her mother to the bank. And the daughter goes, Mom, did you and Dad open an account in a bank in Columbus? And the mom goes, well, of course we didn't open a bank in Columbus. We do our banking right here at Union Savings. Why would I go to a bank in Columbus? And the daughter goes, well, Mom, I wouldn't think so, but this letter says that you're being welcomed to this bank. And the mom says, that's just preposterous. And the daughter goes, well, I think we need to investigate this, Mom. Something's going on here. The daughter came to me. And we were able to get records then from that other bank. and
From
come
the bank, the newly opened account?
in Columbus.
In
correct.
Columbus, okay.
Find out that about $600,000 had been transferred out of the Union Savings Bank by this bank manager, or with the assistance of the bank manager, to this remote bank in Columbus. Then, in the name of the older couple, jointly with the banker. So now the banker has added herself to the account
As a signer on the account?
as a joint owner.
As a joint
Joint
owner?
owner.
Oh my goodness, but she had a power of attorney, correct?
And a power of attorney was executed.
Ooh.
Then changes the address for the mailings of the account so that all the statements are mailed to her address, the banker's address.
Okay.
The only letter that got through was that first introductory letter.
My goodness.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness for that.
And then using those funds, in now the bank manager
Yes.
has total access to this account in Columbus.
Yes.
She's getting the statements. Wire transfers $407,000.
In addition to the $600,000 that had been initially opened?
Takes from that $600,000, $407,000, transfers it to a title company in Dayton, and buys her and her husband a lovely house in Beaver Creek.
You just gotta be kidding me.
This is serious.
This is just,
Yeah.
give me the end. So tell me, what was your involvement? The daughter
Well-
comes to you with a red flag about this remote bank that their parents, or her mother, I guess, is now involved in.
Correct.
With the bank manager, unbeknownst to the mother.
Yes, and the daughter had met the bank manager and had
Okay.
seen her at the house, and the husband was kind of thinking, this is kind of strange, but whenever she would talk to mom or dad about it, they would become indignant. These are our friends, and this is none of your business, and they're our good friends, and you just keep out of this. So had backed off.
Yeah.
But her antenna was up. The daughter's antenna was up. As soon as the daughter comes to me, the first thing that I have to do in a situation like that is act quickly.
Oh,
'Cause monies
yes.
they just dissipate quickly.
Yes.
I didn't want to end up in
Yes.
South Carolina.
Yes, exactly, at the mobile home park.
Right. So the first thing I did is got authority for the daughter. The mother gave the daughter authority to look at the mother's accounts.
Okay.
And then the daughter used, with my assistance, obtained information regarding those accounts in Columbus.
Okay.
And that's how we were able to determine what happened to the money.
And the bank in Columbus was, of
Cooperated.
course, cooperating.
It was totally
They're not
cooperative.
interested in being
No.
involved in something
No.
like that.
I think had they known what was going on, they never would have opened the account,
Probably wouldn't have.
but they didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as soon as I found that $407,000 had been wire transferred to buy a house for the banker, I immediately wrote a letter to the banker and her husband, demanded a full accounting, an immediate return of that money.
Immediate.
And if they had returned the money, everything would have been fine. But instead of returning the money, they retained an attorney.
To do what? To do
Once
what,
again,
Craig?
claiming these were gifts. Just
Okay.
like going back to my case in the 80s, these were gifts. Because of this elderly couple's great affection for my husband and I, they wished to gift us
To
these
gift
funds.
you $600,000 of liquid assets?
Correct.
To gift
Right.
you?
They're virtually basically wiped them out of their entire, most of their life savings.
Yeah. No gift letters, no...
There was the case is ongoing. It's still in the early stages.
Okay, a
and
discovery, I guess.
There was
Yeah.
what's called a very strange document, a hand or a typewritten, crudely typewritten monetary gift letter. We're looking into, is that a legitimate document? Was it a fraud document? Discovery has to be done.
Yes, I was going to say, you have to enter into discovery at this
But
point.
ultimately, this case is going to go to a jury if it's not settled.
Absolutely.
And
The poor woman has got to be emotionally
distraught.
distraught.
And that's the particularly difficult thing about these elder fraud, senior citizen financial abuse cases. Older people, as you know, have so many difficulties in their life. They've lost a spouse. Typically, they're often sick.
Health challenges.
Health, all kinds of challenges.
Right.
And to learn that a friend of theirs, someone that they trusted, in fact, has turned against them, it's emotionally devastating. It It just sets them
Ah.
back.
I really, that, and your involvement in it, first I wanted to thank you for being an advocate for the elderly.
Certainly.
I want to thank you from my heart, because that is an area that I am very sensitive about. And that is, even as I myself am officially a senior and moving down that chain, and to think that at the most vulnerable stage in your life, now you've got to deal with a court system.
Yes.
I mean, come on, discovery, affidavits,
The wheels of
disposition,
justice turn slowly.
Quick,
Yeah.
I mean slow, and you're sitting there in your home, this poor woman, this widow, pining over her husband and how he was a responsible husband and a hard-working husband, and to find that at a snap of a finger,
Gone.
gone
From a trusted friend.
from a trusted friend. That is devastating. How is she doing?
She's doing all right. She had some level of dementia.
Okay.
And she was being, she's able to live independently at that time. You can talk to her and such, but she could not manage her financial affairs.
Okay.
I assisted in obtaining a guardianship
I was
for her
going to say a
to
guardianship.
manage her financial
Okay.
affairs.
Okay.
She really was in a point where she couldn't live by herself anymore.
Okay.
And the daughters, although they visited regularly, someone in that kind of a situation where there's memory loss, they might leave a pan on the stove and then forget that it's on the stove.
Did she
because
have
of fire.
early onset Alzheimer, you think?
Yes, it looks
that
that
was
way.
happening?
Correct.
Now, I don't want to get engaged in a legal conversation because I'm not an attorney. And for those of you that are attorneys, I'm not engaged in the unauthorized practice of law. So let's just stop. But I do have a query, and that is, does anything she says at this time regarding this litigation have validity because of her mental incompetency? Without
Well-
trying to jump the case, just asking.
Yes, well, that question remains to be determined. She has
Okay.
not been called upon to testify.
Okay.
Those are off in the
Okay,
future.
okay.
But someone who does not have competency to manage their financial affairs, that doesn't mean that they're not competent to know who they are,
Right.
and who their family is,
Certain cognitive
engage
skills, right.
in an animated conversation. In fact, in the Dane Daily News article, the Dane Daily News reporters, there were 2 reporters and a photographer, and they sat with this woman in my office for probably 2 hours
Okay.
and had a lively conversation
Okay.
with her.
So she's still animated and
Correct.
functional. Good.
Correct.
Good.
Correct.
Good.
She
Good.
doesn't have the level to function for managing her own financial affairs. Too vulnerable. Her judgment is impaired in that regard. But she had very strong feelings about what had happened and was just outraged that her friends,
Ah.
the bankers, had done this to her.
Oh, that is absolutely horrible. But I have a story, and that actually did happen, and within my own family, where my great uncle, who was always a bon vivant, as I tell people, that one of the capricious things about aging is that you don't know you're getting older.
Yes.
Oh, you don't.
That's
You're
a
like,
plus, yeah.
That's a plus. But he gave a POA to his granddaughter, who abused it to the tune of refinancing his home and using proceeds for God knows what, but including a car. And the house ultimately wound up, because he didn't know, and he wasn't making payments. The house ultimately was going to sheriff's sale and public notice, and then I wound up getting involved on a secondary basis with my mother, who is an astute woman, and trying to reposition everything. And I must tell you, it was traumatizing It was so traumatizing because it's family. And when you're looking at, it's kind of like that English tale about Goldilocks, or you're like, I'm in a story.
Yes.
The Wolf and the Three Pigs. You know, I'm the pig, and it ended well. We were able to short sell the home. We were able to find him a place with a wonderful landlord, moving him from a ownership to a rental. Very simply, we were able to get him reestablished and his dignity. But it was not something I'd ever want. He's now deceased. But Craig, I just never want to have that experience again.
No, it's terrible. When the perpetrator is someone who's trusted, especially a family member, it just goes to the heart.
It went to
And,
the heart.
yeah.
And people ask me, well, why didn't he name you? Why weren't you? And I said, as a matter of business, I don't want to be a POA.
A lot of responsibility.
I don't want the fiduciary responsibility of managing someone else's life. And I said, it's an honorable position, but it is a lot of work. And you really have to be committed to doing that type of thing. It's just like being an executor on a will.
It's a burden.
It
Yes,
is a burden,
Yeah.
and unless you are really there, it just might not be something you want to do. But as I said, my mother stepped to the table. I was right there with her. We got this thing worked out. God was truly with us, because it was like, I think I'm going to lose my mind. And he was oblivious. It was like, why are you, I even
Why
took,
worry?
why are you so upset? And I even took him to as far as, we'll prosecute. And absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And it gave me insight as to how this issue really can be complex.
Oftentimes the victim does not know they're victimized and will protect the perpetrator.
Well,
and try
I
to
began
keep-
to feel
yeah.
like
They think you're the bad guy.
The bad
right.
guy.
Why are you interfering?
Why are you behaving like this? And I was like, because I do not do theft. And this is smelling like criminal. And I'm sorry, but I just, it was just something that really kind of opened my eyes. I had the textbook, you know, I got the book, I know all the God, I know what to look for, but when it hits home and you're dealing with that, and it just was devastating. It was. So I can imagine.
It's difficult to be prepared for it. It truly is difficult to be prepared for it. And it can strike home. I just had, in my own family, my mother-in-law was almost a victim of a very popular scam, and the audience might want to hear about this.
Well, no, please tell me about it, because one of the things I was looking at on fraud committed by strangers, because there are two types of fraud, family and relatives and caregivers, and then fraud by strangers. And they list in the fraud by strangers prizes and sweepstakes and charitable contributions and investments.
Well,
They have a list.
This was a very clever one.
Tell me about
Yeah,
it.
I think
This
it's an interesting
sounds
story. Maybe
interesting.
it'll
Yeah, maybe
reward
somebody
someone,
else
yeah.
will recognize it.
So my mother-in-law gets a call
Yes.
from someone who says, this is Matthew, her grandson.
Okay.
And Grandma, this is Matthew. And she goes, "Oh, Matthew, I can hardly hear you. And he says, I'm calling from Barbados. And what are you doing in Barbados? Well, Matthew goes to college.
Yes.
And in fact, he had graduated from college
Okay.
recently. He said, well, my roommate, his girlfriend, couldn't go with my friend to Barbados, and he
Okay.
offered the ticket to me, and I'm here with him. Well, she goes, well, I can hardly understand you. I know, Grandma, I'm calling because I was in an auto accident here, and I had to have some stitches on my face and my mouth, so I can't speak clearly. And that covered.
Red flag.
Red,
Okay,
the
but sounded credible.
yeah, and a grandmother's
You're out of the country. You're in a car accident.
and a grandmother is very concerned.
Okay,
Now
sure.
this-
It's their grandchild.
My
grandparents
oh my
love
goodness.
their grandchildren.
Exactly. Here, my grandson is calling me, needs help. Grandma, I need you to wire $2,000 because they won't let me leave Barbados on my scheduled flight because they're still doing this investigation. It wasn't my fault or so. Can you help here? And my mother-in-law goes, well, you really should call your mom. Oh, I don't want to call my mom. She's gonna be mad at me and such. You know, I really
Again, plausible.
correct.
Okay.
Please don't tell mom.
Okay.
I don't want to get in trouble. Could you help me out here? Well, fortunately, my mother-in-law didn't have access to doing that kind of wire transfer, and did call the mom. And the mom, of course, said, well, wait a second, you know, Matthew is not in Barbados. I know where he is. Calls Matthew. And
There he is.
Yes, correct. But I come to find out, and we did some investigation, this is going on all across the country. This is a very common scheme.
How do they know the child's name?
They think that they look on Facebook,
Okay.
and the grandson has a Facebook account, and on the Facebook account, we'll identify his family. This is my mom's name, my dad's name, this is my grandmother, this is my grandfather, very common information. And then they can use that information. So they might see that Matthew has a grandmother in Ohio, in this city, by this name. Then they just go to the phone
check.
book.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, actually, you don't
directory
even have to do that.
assistance.
Just go right to Google.
Correct.
And type in the phone
Correct.
number.
I'm looking for the name of
and boom, there you
exactly.
go. That is
Yeah.
absolutely
And very clever.
frightening.
To have that excuse
Yes.
about I can't, my stitches are preventing me from talking clearly. And was able to engage in a very normal conversation, say all the right things, it was clever.
I
So,
think that kind of scam could be worked on people that are not seniors.
it could.
Truthfully.
Correct, correct.
That
And it
sounds
just
like
takes,
it's just a scam.
take one person
Yep.
to give $2,000. That's good for a day's work. Say you're
It
doing this
surely
all day
is.
long. You're calling people all day long. It just takes one person, or even once a week.
Right.
Because
Right.
what's your overhead? Very little overhead. Some
Right.
long-distance telephone calls, and today you can make long-distance calls for next to nothing.
You're right. So, but another thing regarding the whole issue of strangers, and that sounds like truly a Nigerian scam, which is leveraging Facebook and other social media
Correct.
to get private information. And
Correct.
I am on Facebook, but you know what? I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable because you can lift and post so much stuff and create alter people, meaning alter personalities that
Yes.
can be used to scam,
Correct.
and it looks very legitimate and very credible, but it is not.
Now you think the Facebook friend
Exactly.
is legitimate, and they're not.
And they're avatar. They don't even exist.
And because they're a friend now, they have access to your detailed information.
Exactly.
It's a brave new world.
Confidence schemes. How often do you run into that with seniors beyond the cash and sweepstakes, but where seniors are actually
That's
drawn
very-
into confidence schemes?
That's very prevalent. I was doing an interview on another show, You and the Law,
Okay.
and I had with me an attorney from the Ohio Attorney General's office.
Oh my goodness.
The fraud-
that would have okay.
the fraud
that would-
section.
Okay.
And he agreed to talk about this topic with me. The AG's office receives every year about 30 to 35,000 complaints of consumer fraud. Now, he didn't have the breakdown how many of those involved elderly,
Oh, I would have to believe
but you can imagine
a large number of them do.
35,000 complaints a year.
Of
It's
people that may have actually lost funds.
been a victim of a fraudulent scheme. So it's big. It's going on. It's all across the country, going on in Ohio. And the Attorney General's office does what they can, but they have limited staff.
Well, they have limited
And
staff
how
and
do you
resources.
deal with 35,000 complaints? It's overwhelming.
Whew. Well, here are some red stars that I'd like to make sure that the viewers today are careful of, and I'm just going to simply speak to them, and you can intervene as you want. Prizes and sweepstakes.
Big one. This is a
Okay.
big one. I've had 3 elderly clients who are victims of sweepstakes. 3 of them.
Australian sweepstakes,
Canada,
African
it could be, yeah,
sweepstakes,
or just Canada. Canada's very safe, and of course you don't know, it's all phony. It
Yes,
doesn't matter
yes,
where they
it
say they are.
doesn't matter.
But a couple of them were Canada.
Okay.
And people feel, oh, this Canada, I could just drive up to Canada. And the red flag really is you're a winner. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily a red flag, because sometimes people do win. But the red flag is, in order to claim your winnings, you have to send us an amount of money for our packaging fee or or transfer taxes. Always some type of reason. Send us $28 and we'll send you your winner's kit.
Okay.
Something like that.
So $28.
Now, $28. And again, if you're doing this, thousands of times, you just get
It's a
one
nice
28.
cash.
Not
Nice.
bad.
Let's talk about investments.
Those are very sophisticated.
Okay,
Yeah.
fake gemstones and uninhabitable property and
Business opportunities is big.
business
So,
opportunities.
make money at home. Make $10,000 a week from your own home. Do you have a computer? You can make $10,000 a week without leaving your computer.
Don't think so.
Yeah. Basically, the old adage, if it sounds too good to be true.
I think that's a very powerful thing you just said. If it sounds too good to be true. What about travel? We see a lot of packages being promoted on internet, and seniors want to travel and visit and see foreign countries and do all kinds of things since they have more leisure time.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that one personally, and there's 1,000 heads to this snake.
Oh,
And every time
God.
we think of one,
Here's another
the
one.
criminals will think of something clever. And basically, if it's something if it's an organization you're not familiar with, ask someone,
Okay.
ask a friend, ask a family member, ask your next door neighbor, ask your friend from church, ask your financial advisor, call your attorney. How does this sound? How does this sound to you? Bounce the idea off someone else. The scams that I've seen where there's victims, they get involved and they don't bring anyone into it. They keep it
Wow, they keep it real
quiet.
hush.
Correct.
That could be a problem. What about frauds that are involved with telemarketing? Now, telemarketing is legislatively a lot tighter than it was 10 years ago. But do you still run into situations where people have run into telemarketing scams and have lost money?
I haven't, but I know that the AG's representative have talked about
They have
those
talked
kind of
about
scams.
those as well,
Correct.
telemarketing.
Correct.
Mail?
Mail is big. Typically, the sweepstakes are mail.
Yeah.
You'll get
okay.
it in the mail.
You know,
you're
that's
the
so
winner.
funny because there is such a bifurcation today. Younger people don't even read mail.
Correct, yeah.
Everything is
Yeah.
on internet.
Right.
But the older generation does look forward to their mail. I was in a
It's a
home.
high point of the day.
And I was
Right.
in a home with an elderly lady last week, a friend of my friends, and she was so anxiously waiting for the postman. And I kept saying, boy, do they have them anymore? And she was like, oh, I can't wait. And she got a stack of mail, most of it sweepstakes, you're a winner. Mail I never get. I do not get this kind of
And
mail.
they're very carefully targeted. These elderly people that I've been involved with,
Yes.
that were involved with sweepstakes.
Yes.
First it comes from one. The next thing you know, 2, 3.
Wow,
Then they're getting
so they're on
10.
a list.
Correct.
Isn't there a number or something where you can have your name removed from junk mail?
There is something, a do not call registry for
Yeah.
telephone removal, and I believe there is a do not send mail on the internet. But again, you're dealing with criminals. They're not going to comply with those
They're
rules.
definitely not.
They don't care
Catch
if-
me if you can.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would have to say, listening to you today, the most important thing for seniors to avoid is the whole area of isolation, not having people that you can trust in your circle.
I think so. And they really can't avoid the isolation.
Yeah.
They've lost a spouse or so. But what they could do is have someone that they can bring into their circle to bounce ideas off. Don't write big checks to strangers. or for
Okay.
schemes, or for ideas. I shouldn't say a scheme because they don't recognize it as a scheme.
It is
but
not.
don't for something new, something different. You know, you write checks for known businesses and such.
Right,
But
right.
now all of a sudden you're approached by a Canadian sweepstakes company. That's an
Right.
alert. Or you're approached by, a grandson in Barbados or something.
yeah,
These are
yeah.
unusual situations. Talk to someone. Talk to your neighbor. Talk to your daughter or son in California. Don't act quickly. Another scam that is popular is a contractor just showing up at a house.
Yeah, that's on my list about
Getting there.
contractors.
I had
Yeah,
a case,
home and automobile repairs.
I had a case in the Clifton area. An older woman living by herself, another widow for many, many years, lived in an older farmhouse, and gets a knock on the door. She's getting along fine, gets a knock on the door, and gentleman with a pickup truck outside. Ma'am, I couldn't help but noticing when I was doing some repairs, I'm a contractor, doing some repairs across the street, you need some roof work.
Oh,
Come
my
on, let me show
God.
you. Brings
Oh.
her out and
Pulls
points
off
to
a shingle, yeah.
points to a
Uh-huh.
shingle and would you like me while I'm in this area? I can take
Right,
care of you.
right.
Sure, she was just delighted. Thank you so much for alerting me to this. He says, yes, if you don't take care of that, your house is going to
Yeah.
leak water. It costs a lot of money.
Right.
Next thing you know, he asks her for a check for a down payment, $6,500.
$6,500.
You could probably do the whole roof for
I was going to
$6,500.
say
Yeah.
$6,500 is a roof. Okay.
The next day, comes back, ma'am, I need that $6,500 down payment. She had no memory. Writes another $6,500.
Oh my God.
Yes.
He's down into $13,000.
$13,000. Then he comes back and he puts a ladder and maybe spends 15 minutes on the roof. Then he comes down. I need some materials, ma'am.
Are you-
$13,000.
Are you kidding me?
And she had memory loss, and she
Oh
didn't
my
know it.
God.
And she had no idea that she had already written him checks. By the time he was done with her,
And do say done with her.
$52,000
For a
of
roof.
checks for roof work that was never done. Now,
Ah,
he ended up in jail.
yes.
He ended up in
Criminal
jail.
fraud.
But a lot of times they come to me and they want them to go to jail. And then what I say is, we don't necessarily want them to go to jail before you get your money back.
Yes.
Because
yes.
get
yes.
your money back.
And then. Right.
Correct. And also, the criminal justice system is overwhelmed.
It is, and
Because-
they're going to be right back out.
And it's
many
difficult for them
cases,
to,
yes.
it takes time
Yes,
to
yes.
investigate the case. So it's oftentimes a two-pronged approach.
Right.
First, try to get that money back. We were able to get the money back for that woman because
For the contractor.
he had bought some new vehicles and such, and so we
Wow.
were able to. But
Now, what
You have
about
to act quick.
auto repairs? That's another area as well where the elderly seem to get taken advantage of by things that are not wrong all of a sudden are wrong.
Yeah.
And unless you really know cars, how would you know?
that
I
could
mean,
happen-
even maybe it could happen to
exactly,
me.
Right.
You
My
know.
dad could take apart an engine, but I did not acquire that skill. They didn't teach that in law school.
No.
So, yeah. And again, that's an example when something is going on and I get an estimate from the car place.
Uh-huh.
It's going to cost $600. I call someone.
Right.
I call my father-in-law, or I
Right.
call some friend of mine that knows about. What do you think? And that's what older people have to do.
Well, maybe
Don't try
they
to make the
should.
decision yourself.
Maybe they should just deal with the dealership, even though the dealership is the most expensive venue. But the dealer does have the weight of the car companies. They do
Correct.
have Better Business Bureau. They have the credentialing
Correct, and that's what
that
I
is
do.
necessary to validate.
Correct.
And I know that seniors are always crying about money, but sometimes you have to spend money to keep money
Exactly.
because it could get a whole lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
It really, really could.
Correct.
Let's shift because we've only got a few remaining minutes and I can talk about this forever. But when we look at financial exploitation by relatives and caregivers, some of the things that, the methods that they use, I have found to be increasingly sophisticated. beyond just taking their money and their property and valuables, but also signing their pension checks and cashing them without permission, giving away their possessions without their knowledge, using their ATM machine cards, which I tell seniors, I don't even want you using an ATM because it's just too dangerous. It is today. And now we're looking at, with the government, I just read, Craig, where all of their checks are going to have to go through a bank, through electronic.
Electronically, yeah.
Yeah, that's not, there are no more checks. They're not going to be mailing any more checks out to them.
And I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
Because I'm involved in a case where the checks are being put in the mail.
Okay.
And the perpetrator would get the elderly person to endorse the check and said, I'll take the check. You don't have to drive to the bank. I'll take it to the check and put it in your account for you or cash it for you. Bye-bye check.
Wow.
Yeah. So this way, at least, it's going to be electronically deposited. Now, elders might not like that. They're used to dealing with paper.
Well, a lot of them aren't even. They like the feel of the paper.
Yeah.
They don't like going to a bank
and that's another
and
reason.
writing checks.
Another reason the elderly are so easily targeted, because we are in a new world.
It is, Craig.
And it's tough enough to keep up with things when you're familiar with them, but now you're dealing with computers and emails and you know, Google and Facebook.
And it's frankly overwhelming.
It is, yeah.
And I mean, for those of us that are in the industry, sometimes I feel like I'm on a conveyor belt. You know, like zoom, zoom. And
We
you're
need
like,
grandkids to teach us how to.
Oh, I have nieces. And I'm like, I don't understand how this works. I don't. So I can only imagine when I look at seniors, older seniors, and then elderly, which are those over 85, that they've got to be absolutely terrified. And of course, the number one concern that all seniors have is the loss of independence, and secondly is not having enough money.
Correct.
And making sure they shore up those relationships so that somebody will take care of them. But how that plays out in so many cases may not be so good.
No, it's difficult, and there's no one simple solution. You know, I say try to reach out to someone, bring someone into your circle. A lot of times, you know, older people don't have that kind of relationship with kids. You know, when we raise kids, they're kids.
Yeah.
And I know
And now they're
to my dad's dying day, I was a lawyer, but I was still his kid.
Right.
So he didn't, when I would give him legal advice, he didn't see it as legal advice.
Right.
His kid
It was
talking to
my
him.
child was talking to
So
me.
it meant nothing.
Well, my hope and my prayer is that seniors will exercise a tremendous amount of caution and wisdom in how they engage in relationships today. Certainly one of the real concerns I have, and I know you run into it, is widows, unlike widowers, widows will give money to their children, lots of money.
They tend to be generous.
They tend to be generous to the children and to the grandchildren, and sometimes it does not play out very well.
No.
And so I tell widows, master the art of no. Please do that for yourself. Master that art. The other thing is to recognize if your gut on a situation. And that's not if you're, of course, if you're dealing with cognitive issues,
The judgment becomes impaired.
Yeah, you can't do that. But family members that love their parents and the elderly just need to perhaps be more engaged.
Like my client's daughter.
Yes.
Look at the mail, kind of check up on your parents, even though they might not want to be checked up on.
Craig, I'm telling you, it's an odd situation, but they say the older you live, the more you become like the child, and your child becomes the parent. And that's an odd shift, but sometimes it's not a bad thing.
It's reality.
It is reality. So now, how long have you been, in the remaining time we have, how long have you been in this practice with elder abuse?
Well, I started practicing law in '78.
That's a long time.
My first elder law. I'm 59 years old.
Okay,
I've
right behind me.
I've been at
You're
it
getting
for
there.
a while. My first case was that nephew who took advantage of the uncle, and that was probably mid to late '80s.
Okay.
So it's been a couple decades now.
Has it? And have you found, for the most part, that one can get through some things just by following the practice of being careful and cautious and being involved?
That never does any harm.
Thank
The
you.
sad part is that sometimes even being careful isn't enough.
Well, listen, for those of you that are tuning in today on today's segment of The Power of Money, this has been awesome. And I hope that you have learned some things that can be helpful as you go about your daily activities. For those of you that have family members that are elderly, keep a lookout, keep an eye on them. And sometimes you may wind up getting chewed out, but just be mindful of the fact that that's all a part of aging too. And sometimes it's hard to convey to seniors what they need to know to enable them to get through this life successfully. But it's a journey. And like any life story and any life journey, there are lots of players and lots of participants. So engage actively in helping seniors in your family, in your church, or whatever relationships you have. Be mindful of the fact that a society that honors its elderly is a society that thrives. Because if you live long enough, you're going to get there. And you would like to know that you got there with the love and the compassion and concern of your children and those that are around you. I'm Michelle Graves, and this concludes today's segment of The Power of Money. As always, it's been awesome having you to listen in and to view the station, and I want to thank Craig T. Matthews, attorney at law in Dayton and Cincinnati, Ohio. If you have had encounters with elder abuse, financially, he is the man you need to call. You got my stamp of approval, and again, I thank all of you for joining me. And in conclusion, God bless you richly this day. You take care.